Just because you are right does not mean that I am wrong. You just have not seen life from my side. These words were at the bottom of an image, which I believe is displayed on your screen at this moment, that was sent to me in late August. An image above it were two individuals standing at opposite ends of a number. One said 6, and the other said 9. And if this wasn't the most simple yet perfect graphic for what we are looking at through our world today. I want to begin with a quick understanding of COVID-19, although I will not spend too much time on this topic. Each of us has been forced to make our own decisions when dealing with COVID-19. We have done this both holistically and daily with our decisions and pivots. Imagine coming back to that image of the 9 and the 6 and the debate on that image. For this is what I mean. The hardest thing with COVID-19 is removing just what you see and what you do. And for a minute, just 1 minute, understand that we are all living very different lives. For some, work never stopped. And for others, it came to a crashing halt. Some have been able to see their parents the entire time. Others are still longing for a hug. Some went to public parks and restaurants when they reopened. Others still cringe at going to the grocery store. Some are allowed their children to play in the backyard with other children while preferring to homeschool their children, while others waited 6 months of isolation for school to reopen safely. We each have chosen what is best for our own bubble, knowing that whatever choices we make can greatly impact community and the state we live in. Again, I come back to the 9 and 6. While there can be multiple correct answers to a solution depending on where we personally choose to stand, we need to acknowledge facts. There is a 9 and a 6. Understand the spectrum we live in and how we can function in such a world, that I believe much of our decisions boil down to trust. In family, in friends, in neighbors, in community, in religious institutions, in doctors, and certainly in our government. One of my teachers, Merle Feld, wrote the following of Kol Nidre. I am grateful of this, a moment of truth to stand before you, God, in judgment. You know me as a liar, and I am flooded with relief to have my darkest self exposed. Every day, I break my vows to be the dutiful child, the selfless parent, the caring friend, the responsible citizen of the world. As we do every year, we watch Cantor Feimlum as he strolls down the middle aisle later tomorrow. And these words, alongside Kol Nidre, are wake-up calls from our Jewish liturgy. Nothing more powerful than the moment we hear their music. The impact of Kol Nidre specifically rings in the ears of our children and creates that first tear that may run down our face in shame, in pain, and in nerves. The gates of heaven are open and we plead with God, I know I am not perfect. As Feld said, grateful to stand before you, God, in judgment. And here we are begging for another chance for God and individuals to trust us again. Politics, the forbidden word from a bima, are doing this to us as well. Your debates on ideas, policies, and even candidates used to have an element of trust. Because you can only debate ideas which someone you truly believe, and that the other person's argument is also for the sake of heaven. This is the very essence of our political structure and our Jewish structure. Remember a time when friends could disagree on political topics? Remember when married couples didn't have to vote the same way? Remember when your parents didn't have to yell at you because of who they guessed you were voting for? And I have a sneaking suspicion that 95% of people watching, and that 5% I believe is very generous, knows exactly who they are voting for in November, regardless if you are a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. No text from a friend, no political ad, no celebrity music video is going to change that. The polarization of politics has forced us to the extreme of our very own. And anyone trying to recognize that there is both a 9 and a 6 is shunned as a denier. In Judaism, we call honest debates and arguments and disagreements l'shem shamayim, meaning for the sake of heaven. We learn this concept in Pirkei Avot 5:17. Kol machloket shehi l'shem shamayim, sofa li'yitkayem, v'she'ena l'shem shamayim, ein sofa li'yitkayem. Every dispute is for the sake of heaven, will in the end endure. But the ones that are not for the sake of heaven will not endure. Which is the controversy that is for the sake of heaven? Such was the controversies of Hillel and Shammai. And which is the controversy that is not for the sake of heaven? Such was the controversy of Korach and all of his followers. Hillel and Shammai were debates over ideas and practice. They had clear differences in opinions, but all of their debates centered around facts and knowledge, as well as the environment of people's daily lives. Both views were recorded, valued, and considered, but they had differences of opinion, and they debated them, and their students debated them, and we still debate them. They argued their points of view and knew there was an eventual solution. Korach, on the other hand, the controversies he brought forth was against the common good. It went against God and the Israelites. It hurt people around him just so he could be right. Today's polarization and anger spewed from loved ones over differences in politics and even religious observance is unbecoming of the Jewish people. I'm not only referring to Jews in the pews, I am very much talking about my own closest rabbinic colleagues. The ridiculousness of the construct that a politician is horrible because of one vote is preposterous. And if you dig deep enough, you will never find anyone that you like, which probably includes yourself. Politicians are politicians. No one, not Donald, not Joe, not Bernie, not Kamala, not Amy, and the like, will snap their fingers and magically create a utopian society that includes all of us equally and equitably. Now, this, of course, is where some of you are saying to yourselves, is the rabbi really defending Donald Trump? And the other half is saying, thank God, Rabbi Fine is a Democrat. And I am not advocating for either. That is not my role, and that is certainly not my job. I am, and hear me clearly, saying we need to stop being so righteous about our own opinions and about being correct on politics that we forfeit Shamayim, heaven. I am far prouder that John Kasich and Colin Powell attended the Democratic National Convention, not because it was the DNC, but because Republicans and Democrats need to be together. It is not a zero-sum game. And in a world of opposite poles, it's time for Democrats and Republicans and their supporters to end their blind hatred, public and private, and understand that people and a country and potentially a world are at stake. Shake hands, go to lunch, even run on the same ticket. Enough is enough. America, at its core, and though we have work to do, is for the sake of heaven, a better world for all. And there are multiple opinions on the roadmap on how to get there. Our blindness towards truth and trust and good for the sake of the righteousness has created a world so foreign to what is actually good. I was in 6th grade when my school paused to come together to watch Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat shake hands on the White House lawn. This is a picture that I imagine many of you can visualize in your minds on demand. I remember packing into the multi-purpose room, a little young to fully appreciate what was happening. And I remember how emotional our staff was for this historic moment. I remember my parents reading the newspaper the next day in all the hope that was on the White House lawn. Can we pause now for a moment tonight on Kol Nidre and appreciate what just happened in Israel just a week ago? 2 Arab nations, the UAE and Bahrain, made a peace for peace deal with Israel. Do we not understand how historic that is? 2 countries came together with Israel to normalize relations, recognizing after 70 plus years the Zionist dream and the state of Israel. Jerusalem was lit up with the UAE and Bahrain flags while Hatikva rang in the streets of Dubai. No bloodshed, no prisoners, and no land. Just peace for peace. And I firmly believe the founding of the modern state of Israel is also for the sake of heaven. After all, it has provided unparalleled protection and hope for the Jewish people, and its existence is a pillar of democracy in the Middle East. In 2016, then Secretary of State John Kerry said, "There will be no separate peace between Israel and the Arab world." And I want to make that very clear to all of you. I've heard prominent politicians in Israel saying sometimes, well, the Arab world is in a different place now. We just have to reach out to them. We can work some things with the Arab world and we'll deal with the Palestinians. No, 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 he continued. I can tell you that reaffirmed within the last week, because I've talked to the leaders of the Arab community, there will be no advance in separate peace with the Arab world without the Palestinian process and Palestinian peace. Everybody needs to understand that. That is a hard reality. Mr. Secretary of State was so very, very wrong. I remember flying to Israel once and looking at a map of where flights connected all over the world. And the gap from when you land in Tel Aviv to where you can then fly, now not allowing Israelis or tourists of Israel to fly in the airspace above so many countries, was all the proof I needed to understand the hatred that the people have for Jews and Israel. And now, at the White House, two countries are with Israel signing deals that allow for vacations and commerce. Because unless you see the Middle East conflict as a Jewish and Arab issue leading the way, which it is not, that you can have such a view. The Iran-Iraq war claimed over a million lives. The Gulf War, ISIS, war in Yemen, gassing of its own people in Syria, Sunni-Shiite conflict. These are all so much larger and more threatening issues to the region, for Palestinians and for America. These peace agreements, and likely more soon, are the very proof of the Middle East situation. In what world is a peace for peace deal not good. How many of us, objectively, if asked without politicians involved, would want such a deal for ourselves, for America, and certainly for Israel? 99%? Laharav Harkov of JPost, she writes, the agreement will include establishing embassies and exchanging ambassadors, investments in Israeli economy, trade, direct flights between Tel Aviv and Abu Dhabi, an investment in Israeli efforts to develop coronavirus vaccine, and cooperation on matters of energy and water. An important element of the deal for the UAE is the expectation that its citizens will be able to visit Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. How much more pain needs to happen in Israel? How many more years do we need to try the same ideas and tactics leading nowhere before we have to build a structure that works? And ideally, this leads to an eventual land and peace and a government for its people, for the Palestinians. Harkov states in her article that Ben Zayed, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, tweeted that an agreement has reached to stop further Israeli annexation of Palestinian territories, and the UAE and Israel also agreed to cooperation on setting a roadmap towards establishing bilateral relationship. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi similarly tweeted that he values the efforts in order to achieve prosperity and stability in the region. The West Bank would be designated for an eventual Palestinian state, which would receive recognition and $50 billion in aid package from the U.S. Peace, relations, and closer to a potential statehood for the Palestinians. Dan Shapiro, the former ambassador of the United States of America to the State of Israel under President Barack Obama, stated, getting Israeli and Arab leaders to sit together as neighbors with normal relations has been a long-term strategic objective of the U.S. Many others join this trend, and may these agreements foster peace between peoples with economic, cultural, technological cooperation and exchange. In addition to opening new official ties with Arab states, bearing annexation helps keep a two-state solution alive. Palestinians may be unhappy today, but there are possibilities towards a better future for them. So who opposes this deal? Who opposes peace for peace? Iran. Newsflash, they do not like us. And they aren't going to because of course, we are Jewish. Both American political sides are aligned and think this is good. Good for Israel, good for the Palestinians, good for the Middle East, good for America. And where were we? Where was nearly all the Jewish organizations that I champion as a conservative rabbi? Where were our Jewish organizations, quick to denounce everything, quick to object to anything? Yet we cannot celebrate our own peace and safety. Where was the moment of seeing faces of my parents so joyous when reading the paper? My teachers overcome with joy. How many of us celebrated? How many of us watched? Retweeted one of the greatest moments in Israeli history. Peace for peace. Are we only trying to imagine a Jewish world without happiness? One that predicates the happiness of Jewish Americans without the mere calm for our brothers and sisters in Israel? Acknowledge moments of happiness. And if we cannot find civil discourse in this country, starting with every last single one of us, we are all in grave amounts of trouble. Our country, our religion, our humanity. The reason I'm sharing all of this, besides the true appreciation for this incredible and recent events in Israel, is because of our lack of trust and faith in our politicians has blinded us, and even divided us. so far from each other that we cannot even celebrate together. That, my friends, is sad. And no fancy word for it. It's just sad. We are so polarized by American politics that the other's view we cannot celebrate or listen or share. We are a people. We are a faith. We are Americans. We are Jews. And it is deeply rooted in all that we are from rabbinic Judaism, that all our interactions should be l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. I encourage all of you, myself included, to take a hard look in the mirror. After all, that is what Yom Kippur is about. To acknowledge whose voice we discredit, who we yelled at, who we force-fed our own beliefs, who we taunted, who we shamed, who we stopped speaking to because we differentiate on an issue, on two issues. I can stand up here and say there is certainly a spectrum of ideas that are for the sake of heaven and others that are the ones that belong in the world of Korach. Being a bigot is not okay. Harming others for the sake of your own personal gain is not okay. But we must be able to wrestle with ideas, ways of living, different notions of success and effort, coming to realizations about our own self-being, and bring back civil discourse and the appreciation of what we do not know or what we do not see. And in order to understand just a bit of what is at stake, democracy and civilization and ethics, I ask that we turn, not on Yom Kippur, to the film that's free on Netflix, The Social Dilemma. This quick watch will explain not only what is at risk, but what is happening to the manipulation of our ideas, especially amongst our youth, and how we are susceptible and prone to our own inklings, and how it is amplified by our screens. But today I ask that each one of you, whether you're 16 years old or 60 years old, older or younger, find time to find commonality. To pick 5 senators or members of Congress who you have written off. If you're a devout Democrat, pick 5 Republicans. And if you're a reverent Republican, pick 5 Democrats. And take 3 of them and find all the commonalities that you share. Did they vote alongside you on one issue? Did they give a powerful speech that you thought was kind? Do they have a real argument on a heated issue that you disagree with them on, but they're not actually wrong? It's just a belief. And then find 2 politicians from that opposite side that you thought you could never stand. And begin to read some good articles about them. And find one issue, one vote, one stance that you can come back to and understand that their agenda, or their bias, or their mere perception is too for l'shem shamayim. After all, we do not want, and if you have read the Bible even a little bit, everyone to think exactly like us, and to act exactly like us, and to speak exactly like us. Our stories teach us that there are others in the world, and we must do our best to work together, especially and because of our differences. We're all on the same team, and we have to come to terms with that, because it's not going to get any easier in November. We may tip our cap to those who agree with us, and that's okay too. But then we have to go and put on the same jersey, all of us, and play the game together. The chaos of distrust and the extreme righteousness will only bring more chaos. An ethical system only acknowledged by you and for you has no legs to stand on but your own. The Garden of Eden ended long ago. This is not a utopian society, and we all have a serious role to play in its healing. Conversations, ones for the sake of heaven. Pure for a better world happen when we meet others with different views, when we hold our views with the fragility that we hold others, even at times supporting others when we disagree with them, placing our trust back into others with the understanding that they too want to make this world a better place. L'shem Shamayim. Accepting that sometimes, and maybe more often than not, the 6 is a 9, and the 9 is a 6. Gamar Chatima Tovah.